Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. It's a Tuesday afternoon, May 17th. And I could do this hugely lengthy Johnny Carson monologue on Mark Herschberg. Just one of the most fascinating people I've met. We've been actually chatting here for the last hour, just getting to know one another. I kind of met on LinkedIn, and there's so much to unpack. Mark has recently written the Career Toolkit, which I'm holding up to you. Mark is an MIT guy, and we're going to talk about that. Not only did he go to MIT, but he teaches at MIT, and he wrote the Career Toolkit. And why this really resonates with me, because this is going to help young people navigate life, is because I taught at Rutgers a couple of years ago a course called Career Explorations, one of the highlights of my life, having been given the opportunity to teach young people. But what I've been saying to Mark and knowing everything about the Career Toolkit is my impressions of never before in human history. This is just me talking. But never before in human history has a generation that's around now and the ones that are coming up needed this kind of help. And one wouldn't think that would be the case with 24/7 input going on and Google and everything else going on in this world. But my goodness, these young people today need so much guidance and help. It's just a different world. Their world is different, but they need these basic elements to really succeed. It's simple stuff. It's powerful stuff. So I'm just so glad that the universe brought us together, Mark, because the stuff that you do is stuff that's close to me. And so without further ado, let me introduce Mark Herschberg. And if you do a little bow, and the other great piece of affinity is you're a Jersey guy, and I love that. So take it away.
I am. Well, thanks for having me on. I did live for a number of years in Princeton Junction, New Jersey. That's where I went to middle school and high school, and my parents were there longer, but I went off to college, so have my Jersey roots. I went to MIT, as you mentioned, and when I graduated MIT in the 90s, I started out as a software engineer. I realized early on that I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. And as I began to understand what does that mean, how does one qualify for it, what makes someone good at that, I realized it wasn't just about being a great engineer. Yes, you had to be very knowledgeable, but there were all these other skills: leadership, networking, team building, hiring, communicating, skills no one had ever taught me. And so I had to develop these skills in myself. Right. As I was doing so, I quickly realized these skills are not just for leaders. They're not just for people in the C-suite. They are for everyone. Senior leaders, but mid-level people, first-level managers, individual contributors, down to the interns. Everyone benefits from these skills. And by the way, entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and single practitioners, these help us in those practices as well. So these are universal skills that aren't being taught. So I began to upskill my team, not just myself. As I was doing this, a number of universities started to survey companies asking, what are the skills you're looking for? And MIT had done a survey, and they found these very same skills listed: leadership, communication, networking, negotiating. I said, well, there is a skills gap here. So MIT wanted to fill in that gap and build these skills in our students. Again, this is not just for MIT students. It's not just for engineers. It's not just for college students. This is for everyone at all skill levels. So we created a program now referred to as MIT's Career Success Accelerator. When I heard about it, I reached out. I said, I've developed content for my team. I'm happy to share it. And I thought that would be it. I just give them the content and wish them on their way. But they asked me to help create additional content with them. And as I was doing so, asked me to help stay and teach. They noted, even though MIT, we have world-class professors, including Sloan professors, and they're great at leading researchers on things like leadership and negotiations, they don't have a lot of practical real-world experience. So they wanted to create the type of program where we bring in that theory and we bring in practitioners like myself. So for the past 20 plus years, in addition to building tech startups, I've built the classic startups out of someone's living room. I've helped Fortune 500 companies who wanted to innovate and launch their own internal startups. So I've done all that, but in parallel, I've taught MIT and elsewhere, and I was doing lots of speaking about it. And now, of course, I have the book and the app.
Wow. So my head is swimming. And I actually, you said something, and I actually wrote it down, skills gap. There is such a skills gap. The kids today are brilliant, like no other generation in history, their knowledge, but there's a skills gap. Basic, basic what I call rotary phone. They don't know what a rotary phone is, but it's basic rotary phone usage. There's a skills gap. And again, I mentored, for a number of years, I mentored students at Rutgers, and I noticed there is a skills gap. And I'm an older guy, but I appreciate the skills, the networking and all this stuff and what you've done. So first question that popped into my head. So why isn't this taught more?
There are historical reasons why we don't teach it.
Yeah.
At high school and college. Now, at the high school level, high school is a relatively modern invention. We forget this, but if you go back 150 some years, high school wasn't the norm. And high school really became commonplace back then as we moved into an industrialized workforce. Prior to that, you grew up at home. You might have gone to school to learn the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. And that's really all you needed. And other than that, well, you learned from your parents. Women learned how to keep the house, and boys learned how to do whatever their father did, typically farming. And that's all you really needed to know. Once we moved to an industrialized workforce at the end of the 20th century, people were leaving the farm. They were going into the machine shops, and they had to make sure there was a certain minimal level of education just to function on the machine floor, on the factory floor, to function, being able to get their own apartment and work in society. And so we created that base level. But if you think about the skills needed for that, well, you didn't need higher order functions. You didn't need leadership training. You didn't need networking. You just need basic mechanical skills. Now, at the university level, we see something a little similar. The university system actually dates back roughly 900 years. And that began around the libraries, where it was a search for knowledge. Now, the university system, it's run by professors. They're wonderful people, but professors are very narrow and singular in their thinking. So what happens? We show up to school and we say, hey, I want to be a marketer. So I'm going to major in marketing. And the marketing professors, the experts, the ones with PhDs in marketing, they say, okay, well, we, the experts, think if you want to be a marketer, here's what you need to know. Take some introductory classes, some intermediate, pick a few advanced classes. If you do all this, we'll give you a piece of paper saying you have knowledge in marketing or whatever your field happens to be. Now, they are not saying you're a good marketer. They're certainly not saying you're a good employee. They're just saying you have acquired this knowledge that other people have not. And that, again, when we think back 70, 100 years, that was fine. Because circa 1950, what happened? You showed up to the office, said, hi, I'm a brand new marketing major. What do I do, boss? And your boss says, well, go sit in the corner and I'll hand you an assignment. Sit there, work on it. When you're done, bring it back to my desk and I'll give you the next assignment. We were the cogs in the machine. So you didn't need that higher order thinking. You just needed to know how to mechanically do marketing or accounting or engineering or whatever your task was. We saw a transition. Now, this began really late 70s into the 80s and continued throughout the 90s and early 2000s. A transition as we moved to flatter organizations. We got rid of a lot of middle management. We have more dynamic teams. More teams are interdisciplinary. So we went from just being the cog in the machine where you'd sit there and say, well, my boss will tell me what to do, to now your boss, in fact, doesn't even know what to do. If we think about in marketing, you have bosses who would say, hey, I know there's this thing called TikTok, and we need to be on it. I've never used it. I don't really get it, but make sure our brand is doing well on it. So your boss can't supervise the same way. And what we're looking for, I picked marketing as an example, but really now the teams are teams where you need to take more initiative. You need to communicate with other people. And so it's a different set of skills. It's not just the mechanical knowledge, but this other knowledge. Now, unfortunately, the university system tends to move very slowly. So I think we're still 20, 30 years away before the university finally catches up to the fact that these are the skills people will need for 21st century jobs.
Wow. Wow. Can, so we got the university, can companies get involved in this?
They can and should, but don't.
They don't. Is it a money thing or time? Or?
It's a few different things. So some of it is money. Now, there's this myth that we used to have lifetime employment at companies. And certainly it's true. We did have those people who got their gold watch after 25 years. But in fact, that was the exception. In fact, the employee turnover rate, the average tenure, I think, I'm going to get the number slightly wrong, is around 4.8 years, somewhere around 5 years back mid-century. Now I believe it's down to about 4.2 years. I might have those numbers slightly off, but the point is it hasn't changed that much. It's not like we went from 20 years down to 4. It changed just a bit. We shaved off about a year. Mm-hmm. So we still have roughly the same turnover level. However, we've had other things. If you think about what's happening now in HR, and I bash HR a lot, but I also recognize they have a lot of challenges. Back circa 1950, what did he do as HR? He said, well, recruit some people and make sure payroll runs. That's about it. Today we say, well, you have to recruit some people, by the way, in a hyper-competitive market. Oh, and it's not just payroll, and it's not just benefits. And by benefits, I mean healthcare and 401k. Do you provide daycare? Do you have a flex work hour thing? Have we looked at DEI? Do we have sensitivity training? We have all these other things, and they're good things to have. I'm not knocking any of this, but we kept saying, HR, do more, do more, do more. And there's only so many people and so many hours in a day. Mm-hmm. So we put a lot more in HR. And what we've seen is anytime there's been a recession, the first thing that gets cut, it's the internal HR programs. No. So we've unfortunately really gutted ourselves. Now, the good news is companies can do this and they can do it at low cost, but they have to have the will to say, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to invest. And there is some cost, not financial, but commitment of our employees giving some time for training, of us promoting this program. And a lot of companies, they have trouble doing that.
Wow. Why did you create the app for this?
When it comes to books, particularly nonfiction books, business books, self-help books, I wouldn't call this self-help, it's more business, but they all fall in the same genre, which is unlike your novel. Now, people read your novel and say, hey, this is great. I want to read it. Very entertaining. And maybe they'll read it again if they really like it. But that's it. You kind of take away the big idea. No one's trying to remember the details of a novel they've read. But when it comes to that business book or self-help book, there are specific things you're trying to remember. The techniques, the ideas, the concepts. And it's hard to do so. Now, we know from teaching school, as soon as that final is over, the knowledge just falls out of everyone's brains. Yeah. And for all of us, even as adults, we read a business book and we say, wow, there's all these great ideas. And then you forget 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. Well, that's not helpful to you. You put all this time into reading it. And if you're going to forget most of it, was that a good use of your time? So I wanted to create a way for people to retain their knowledge. This goes into a whole larger thing I do about really what the future of media is, because printed page is an antiquated way to convey ideas. Still good, by the way, I like printed books over ebooks, but it's an antiquated means of conveyance. So I was thinking about what do we need to do? How can we help people better retain the knowledge? And having worked in media, worked in technology, worked in education, I realized we can put these three together. Now, we know there's a proven concept called spaced repetition. That's a fancy name for, hey, look at the material again. when you had the test and you read the chapter, between now and the test, look at that chapter 1 or 2 or 3 more times and you'll remember it better. Flashcards are how we commonly do this. Now, there are plenty of flashcard apps out there, but no one wants to create flashcards for something they've read. I take notes, I'm the exception. But even then, if you take notes, are you going to remember to go and open that flashcard app and look at? You're not. So we create a new type of patent pending app where we take the content. So in this case, the Career Toolkit app, which is available for free on the Android and iPhone. You can download the app, whether or not you buy the book, you can download the app, and it has the highlights from the book. If you went through with a highlighter, this is what you would highlight. So it can be used in one of 2 ways. One way is, oh, I'm about to walk into an interview or a networking event or have a communication challenge I need to figure out. What were all those tips? Open up the app, go to that category of tip, flip through it. So look at those networking tips 10 minutes before you walk into that networking event, and that's going to help you refresh. The other way is in the passive mode. Each day you can set, so at a time you set, you get a push notification with a tip. You don't even have to open the app, just once every 30 days so we know you're still active and we're not just bothering you, but that's it. So perhaps at 9 a.m. as you walk into the office, a tip pops up, you look at it and say, okay, right, good tip, swipe it away. Takes you 2 seconds a day, and it just helps keep these ideas top of mind, whether you use the whole book or maybe you just say, I just want to work on my negotiation skills. I just want negotiation tips. Because by the way, the book is designed, there's 10 chapters, 10 skills. You don't have to read them in order. You can go right to learning to negotiate, chapter 9, and then jump to chapter 2, how to be more effective at work, and then chapter 4 on leadership. Read them in any order. They're standalone chapters. So you can use this app for the book as a whole or a particular section to help you retain what you're reading. And that's, I think, going to be the future for more books, is to take that content and move it out from between the pages.
Yeah. To me, that's a wow. I'm going in for an interview, or not going in. Let's say I'm even doing a virtual interview. I'm a young kid, and I go to this app, and it says, you know what? Put a tie on. I'm just, for example, how important having that app is in your everyday life. In your, wear a tie because whatever. So what a brilliant, I'm quoting Aldous Huxley, listening to you, Brave New World.
Yep, one of my favorites.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Brave New World, an app, just, it's wow. It is a wow. In chatting with you, you also talked about an app, and I didn't ask you much about it, so I don't know nothing about it, although I'm intrigued. What is a brain bump app?
The app we had just talked about was the Career Toolkit app for my book. Once I put it out, I suspected this was going to be something, again, not just for my book, useful for other books, other content. In fact, I had other authors start to ask me, how did we do this? And as I went on podcasts, as you know, I've been on over 300 podcasts. I've been doing a tour. I get asked to go on a lot. Podcasters started saying, well, can we do something like this? And I realized it's not just for books. So what we created is the Brain Bump app. And the way to think of it is almost like the Kindle version of the Career Toolkit app. Just like your Kindle can add any book available on the platform, so too can this app. We can take content from books, from podcasts, from blogs, from lectures, from classes, and can put it on there so it can be used in the same way. There might be podcasts like this one where you say, wow, I'm learning so many great things. Boy, I wish I could remember it, because as soon as I'm done listening, it's going to start to fade. Well, a podcast can put the highlights, the key points, the stuff that they'd probably post on social media. Hey, here's a highlight from the interview, can go into the app and people can access it the same way. So it's a more general version, the Brain Bump. Just give yourself a little reminder about some of what you have encountered. And so you can use it either to retain what you've read or heard, or to discover new types of things. If you're looking at a book, a podcast. Maybe there's a podcast you're thinking, oh, there's so many back episodes. I don't know which one to listen to. I don't have time to listen to them all. Flip through and say, oh, wait, that's a really good point. Let me listen to that episode. So that's an app that we created, and we've launched that as well. And the Career Toolkit is available on BrainBump as well as the Career Toolkit app.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Let's just take a breath. I always like to ask this question. This is completely, Mark, completely off topic, but it's a nice question. So here goes. One word answer. You don't even have to answer it. But anyway, excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Abraham Lincoln.
Great.
That guy is amazing.
He's right up there in my little world. Yeah, I watched not too long ago. What is it, Jonathan Day-Lewis?
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis. What a remarkable movie about. He's such a staggering figure in history. And I'm a kind of a history buff. I spend much of the pandemic watching Ken Burns documentaries, Roosevelt's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, great answer. So moving along, we started to talk about, and the world has changed to hybrid working places. Your comments on, and the world ain't never going to go back, is it, to what it was? And so we've got this.
Probably not. There's a caveat I often put, because what we're seeing right now is the biggest rewrite in the capital labor contract in a century. We had this 100-some years ago, where we had labor laws that promoted the 40-hour work week and worker safety conditions. And then things were relatively quiet. But now we're seeing really a large conflict. And it was brewing prior to COVID, but COVID really just accelerated that change. And so, of course, we're seeing the workers rising up. We're seeing more worker demands. Companies are having trouble retaining. Workers have more power. And I'm often asked, is this the new normal? The answer is, it depends. And I've been saying this even prior to, as we're recording this, we just started seeing the market drop. And here's the it depends. If we continue to have a strong labor market for another roughly 2 years, 1 to 3, I'm guessing, this will become almost institutionalized. The changes workers want, with flexibility, with time at home, with all the different things that they say they want, improvements in culture and the focus of companies on things like that, that will get institutionalized. It just becomes standard. Mm-hmm. And even when we get into a downturn, okay, it's just, this is normal now. This is how it is. If, however, we get a flip in the labor market, where now people are struggling to find jobs, where companies have the power, and as we're recording this, again, we've just seen the market drop. This is in May of 2022. Now, maybe the market will come back. Maybe the market will go down, but the labor market will stay strong. But if we really get to more of a recessionary period in labor, so think, for example, obviously Great Recession, but even smaller ones, like in 2000, 2001, where we saw a recessionary market, if then people start to say, I need a job, they might say, yeah, well, okay, I'm less worried about, is it a cultural fit? I'm less worried about work from home and flexibility. I just need a job. And so if that happens in the next 1 or 2 years, this might be more of a blip and won't have fully transformed. Now, certainly we've moved the standard from, it used to be, I work in tech. We've talked about remote work, and we've had remote companies for years. I've been at a hybrid company since 2017 and had remote workers prior. It went from, well, does work from home really work, to, yes, it works. Now, when is it right for us? And so in this other case, we might go, companies may say, no, hey, 5 days a week, and that's how it is with us. or maybe they'll say 4 days because it's a weak labor market, whereas in a strong labor market, they might have said 3 days. So we're on the cusp of a transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that gets really fossilized will depend on the next roughly 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, I have a quick comment on that. My son is in social media, big time media, and so he's been working from home for for a long time. And then as the pandemic, and this, so I find this fascinating. And as you know, and he's actually with me for a little bit of time with my granddaughter and his wife, and until they find a place where they actually want to. But the point being, so he works from home, and I'm an old-fashioned guy, the rotary phone guy, and I could never process how anybody could work from home, productively. And you have to be in the workplace. You got to drive an hour and a half, whatever. But as things eased, he was called in 2 days a week into the city, and we talk about it all the time at dinner. The productivity is far. I don't know if you've seen this, but he tells me all the time. I'm there in the office, and we, the water cooler and bump. But his observation, his productivity is way better at home.
This is a your mileage may vary type of situation. So we can imagine, for example, a factory worker on the line, not very productive from home.
Right.
On the other hand, someone perhaps working in a call center, well, you can do that from home. In fact, there's less distractions. And it gets to the nature of your work. And so we have to recognize that we're first going to look at work, then we're going to look at culture. Your work itself, if you tend to do something where it is a well-defined process and you don't need a lot of input from others, then if you're the type who can work from home and don't get distracted by the TV or other things, okay, working from home, you don't have those distractions, you don't have noise, you don't have people popping by your office. Even though they can type a chat to you, it's easier to ignore the chat, it's easier to be away. And so for that repeatable, defined type of task work, I say repeatable, I don't mean the same thing over and over. You might be a software engineer writing new code every hour, but still you're on your own doing it. Working from home can make you more productive. On the other hand, if the nature of your job involves lots of conversation, involves interaction with other people, involves being aware of what's going on, then there's some productivity loss by being home that, yes, we can Zoom, yes, we can type that instant message, but it's just not quite the same. And that very same coder, who on the one hand might say, hey, I don't want the distractions and just let me code, and I've worked with lots of coders like that, that very same coder might also say, hey, this new system we're building, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. And so we really, every few hours, I find I got to talk to someone, we have to collaborate, I got to be really on top of what you're doing and you're on top of what I'm doing. Maybe working together and being co-located and being able to turn around in my chair has some value. So it's not even a particular job, other than possibly surgeon or person working at a factory line. It's not that a certain job is better one way or another. It's that the nature of the work that you're doing, which, by the way, can change over time for the same job title, may have benefits to being in or out of office. Now, the ratio, do you need to be in 5 days? Probably not. Can you get everything if you're home 100% of the time? Probably not. So the question is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days a week?
Okay.
Now, then there's the cultural aspect. And the cultural aspect has to do with some people do better when others are around. You've worked in sales. Classically, you have your sales team. For an inside sales team, you have them in the bullpen. And whether you're doing the old school 80s style ring the bell when you get a sale, or just that kind of competitive spirit that, yeah, there are salespeople and you feel that energy and we're all selling, we're all kind of competing with each other. We're not, but we kind of are. You get that feel. It could be Building internal relationships is really important for the company. By the way, this will help companies better retain employees. As we see lots of people resigning, people who have lots of internal relationships will have that pull, more likely to keep them at the company, assuming those relationships are positive. It could just be some people are motivated by, they like having coworkers around. They just like that energy, they like the feel, they like having their work spouse, and you don't get that from home, they feel isolated. So different people and different cultures will lean towards one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's another important aspect. I put out a new article each week, and the article that came out this week is about the struggle that companies will feel when they have people working in the office. And here it's very subtle, but this is very important to understand. Let's suppose employees say, hey, we figured this out, and really we can just be in the office 2 days a week. That's the optimal time. The rest of the time we're at home, we're productive. 2 days, yeah, we know we have to have meetings and it's easier in person. Management during the time in the office, actually whether it's 2 days, 3, 4, management will say, great, we want to see you working. Because here's what most employees don't understand. From management's perspective, when you are remote, it's not that we don't think you're working, but we can't see you work. We see your output, and yes, that's important. Are you doing a good job? Are you getting the reports done, closing your sales numbers, whatever? But we don't see how you're working. You're collaborating well with others. Where are you struggling? It's not so easy to see, and that makes it harder for us to manage. So that's one reason managers want you in the office. It makes their job easier. So when you are in the office, they want to see you working to kind of see how you work. I don't mean they're standing over your shoulder watching, but you get the feel, even the walking out onto the floor, and you just get that sense of what's going on. On the other hand, when in the office, that's a very important socialization time. Those water cooler conversations do matter to some extent. Nothing to do with work per se, but it's that relationship building. And in fact, sometimes those conversations about your kids, your vacation, suddenly leads into something, oh, wait, did you know about this at work? So those conversations matter, and it's important for the culture as a whole to have the social part when you're in the office. So you have this tension from managers want to see you work as much while you're there to make their job easier, but the whole company benefits when there's some socialization, and you'll have that tension while everyone's in the office.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. You know, you just don't appreciate, you don't process how intricate and involved. It seems simple, but it ain't simple. And moving along,
let's consider one other aspect.
Yes.
Again, with everyone saying we can work remote, we don't have to be in the office much, there's going to be secondary effects that we're going to see a few years down the road. And this is challenging, and there's no easy answer. So consider, for example, one challenge is companies say, well, how much time in the office? And some companies say, well, we'll be flexible. We'll let people pick for themselves. On the one hand, you have a challenge that there tends to be more home responsibility for women and for certain underrepresented minorities. They have more home responsibility. So if you let people pick, they're going to probably, we suspect, choose less days in the office. Well, that can be a problem. Again, management, some of it is just kind of seeing people. FaceTime does matter somewhat. I'm not saying you just have to sit in the office, but it's that seeing you work. If I'm just going to make up some numbers just to illustrate, I'm not saying these are actual numbers, I don't have quantitative evidence. If these groups, so women and underrepresented groups, are in the office on average 2 days a week, and the classic white male is in the office 3.5 days a week, well, who do you think is going to get promoted more? That's going to be a problem for our DEI initiatives.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, easy solution. We say, hey, everyone, 3 days a week in the office. Done. Okay, that's fair. And that's certainly something I was recommending going back about a year. But now there's a secondary problem, which is that the underrepresented groups can say, yeah, 3 days a week in the office, but this other company up the street, they're offering 2.5 days in the office. And because of my added responsibilities, I prefer that. I'm jumping ship.
Wow.
So then you're going to lose your pipeline of non-white men that way.
Wow.
And so there are going to be different forces impacting it. We'll have, for anyone, even forgetting about different demographics, when we say, for example, yeah, sure, it's fine that you can work remotely, and you can, and we know that works, but 2 or 3 years from now, who are the people more likely to get promoted? The ones who are in the office. That's even if you have a fully remote team, but hey, once in a while, it's good to have people, we're going to come together for a meeting. Those within driving distance are in the office more than someone 4,000 miles away working from the beach, having a nice life. And so we're going to see secondary effects that this really remote work, I can finally live on the beach and work, will have some implications down the road.
On promotions and advancement and wow, just heavy stuff. I mean, just and you know, and it's all new stuff. There's no you know, there's no roadmaps, there's no recipes. This is all new stuff, and we're just going to have to.
I would liken it, though, to engineering. So in engineering, we're always trying to do something new. We're trying to build bigger, faster, better. But we know the engineering principles, and we can start to say, well, here's the limit of the tensile strength of this material. Here's how Bernoulli principle works, so we're going to need wings of a certain size. We can take what we understand and start applying it in these new areas. And when you understand the principles that we talk about in the book, when you understand what networking is and how it's useful, not just for finding a new job, it's internal networking and what that does. When you understand how to manage people, what that really means, when you understand what leadership is about, you start to recognize challenges. So leadership, for example, we think leadership is, well, I'm going to stand up here and proclaim because I am the leader. Now we know good leaders listen. Good leaders take feedback. When I am in the room, I'm standing before a room of 200 people and I give some announcements, I will get a sense of the room. I can see, are people nodding their heads? Are people angry? Are they confused? How are they reacting? The rest of the day, you can read the mood in the organization. When I'm doing that over Zoom, even if I could see the faces, you get those little Brady Bunch faces, the little Zoom squares. I can't read their mood and body language. And half of them are probably distracted anyway because they're doing something in another window I can't see. So I can still say, well, as a leader, I know I need to announce this and I need to say it this way. But are people still receiving it that way? And can I read them the way I could in person? No, I can't. So knowing that I need to get that feedback, knowing I need the two-way street, knowing one of those channels, both to some extent, have been limited, I need to adjust my leadership because I understand what leadership is about. So when you get the principles, you can start to recognize how do they apply to these circumstances.
Okay. Ain't simple. Ain't simple. You did mention networking is one of my favorite things. How important is it?
It is critically important.
Tell the world how important it is.
Now, unfortunately, most people think networking, that's when they go and find a new job. In fact, they do it horribly wrong. They think, oh, okay, yeah, I'm about to quit, or I've left my job, I gotta find a new one. Time to go network. That is a terrible philosophy. That is akin to saying, you know what, I gotta pack up my apartment this week, so I gotta get some people over to move. I'm gonna head out to a bar tonight, see if I can meet some new people, maybe buy them a beer and say, hey, you know, glad we met tonight. Listen, why don't you come over this weekend, help me pack my apartment? Who comes over to pack you up? It's your friends who you've known since college. It's your friends going back 10 years. It's the relationships you built years ago that you call upon today. So first, people get networking wrong because they think, I do it just in time. No, you do it long before you need it. There's a great book with a very wise title. It's by Harvey Mackey, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And that really is the principle of networking. Plan ahead. Now, the other thing is people think networking is just for finding a job. When you understand what networking is about, you can use it, yes, for finding a job, but you can use it for everything else. And Keith Ferrazzi, who is a leading networking expert, when he has a problem, his philosophy, his approach is, there's someone in my network who knows how to solve this problem. His network is his solution. Just like we carry around our cell phone and we say, well, I've got the internet in my pocket. If I want to know what's the record for the world's fastest animal, well, I'll just pull it up and search for it. His thing, it's the same. It's, hey, if I've got this issue, I'll just pull up my network and search for the answer. And that's a great way to think about our networks. When you have a problem, when you have a challenge or a need, you have created a network to fill it.
When I taught, there were two little statistics. I used to say the same thing in front of each class, and it pertains to networking. And you may have heard this, Mark, but 70% of all the people who get hired in America is a direct result of who they know. That was, I don't know where, if I got that from the New York Times, I don't know where the hell I got that from, but it was like, it so resonated with me because it's networking. Networking is life. When I was a little kid, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was reading the biography of Jim Thorpe, and my mother pulled it away from me and handed me this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie, and she made me read it. I cheated. I only read a chapter or two, but I have takeaways that lasted a lifetime. It pertains to networking. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And it's been my mantra always, even as a journalist. And but anyway, so you've restated what I believe and what I've taught. Networking is a life pursuit.
And for those interested in that book, so Dale Carnegie's book, it is a classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It feels a little dated in the writing, as I'm sure my book will feel dated 100 years from now. There is a book that a friend of mine wrote that's almost a more modern version. It's by Olivia Fox-Caban, and it's called The Charisma Myth. And she breaks down how to be charismatic. This surprises people because we think, well, you either have it or you don't. But in fact, charisma is a skill you can learn, just like you'd learn a sport or learn a foreign language. You can learn charisma. And by the way, the same is true for all the skills in my book: leadership, networking, negotiating, communicating. Now, think about these skills. Some people are natural at it, just like some people are naturally better soccer players. That's fine. But if you take two people, one is a naturally good soccer player who just says, well, I'm good, I don't need to really work at, compared to someone who says, well, I might not naturally be good, but I am going to train, I am going to improve, I am going to get better. That second person will eventually overtake the first. And that's true of all these skills. So don't worry if you are not natural. Some people are, and you may or may not be, but every one of these skills in my books, as well as charisma and many of these other skills, they are learnable. You just need to go and do it. And by the way, the best way to learn these skills, because this is very important, we don't learn these skills the same way we traditionally learn. If I wanted to learn, for example, accounting, okay, I'm going to take an accounting class, I'm going to write down the accounting rules, I'm going to memorize it. But these skills you need to learn differently. It's more akin to learning a sport. I can't teach you basketball by saying, here are the rules to basketball, you're all set. What do you need to do? Well, you need to drill, you need to scrimmage, you need to reflect. Maybe you watch the tape of yourself, of the other team. So we want to do this when we learn these skills. And what I recommend, this is how you can do it yourself. You can get your team to do it, your company to do it. Create peer learning groups. These are groups, I recommend about 6 to 8 people, but you can make them bigger or smaller. So you get these groups of people and you come together and engage with some content. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, you can use my book. If you do so, I break down how to do it. If you don't want to use my book, use a different book, use articles, use a great podcast like this one. Just take some content, everyone read it or listen to it, and then you discuss it. Because if we're learning leadership, as we sit around, we read the same sections, say, okay, well, here's what I got. and you're going to get something similar but slightly different. So, oh, I never would have thought of it that way. Someone else will say, hey, here's my leadership challenge. Now, here's the thing. We talked about scrimmaging. You can't go into the office and say, hey, everyone, I'm going to try leading totally differently today. And oops, I totally screwed it up. And I'm going to call do-over. And everyone just pretend that didn't happen. That's not how it works.
Right.
But if around this team, someone says, I have this leadership challenge, and you all think about and talk about it, that's your chance to scrimmage. Think about, what would I do in this situation? Someone might say, oh, I was in a similar situation. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't. Well, that's the watching the tape. That's the learning from others. And so you can do this. I recommend companies do this. This is what we talked about earlier. A company can do this. I give away the training program, how to do this, completely free on the resources page of my website. No cost to download it. You don't have to give your email address. And you can implement this in your whole organization. If your company doesn't want to do that, do it yourself. Create a local meetup group, find a group of friends, do it yourself. And that's how you really want to learn these skills, because you have to have that discussion and reflection as well as the practice to really advance.
Okay. I'm digesting. This is great stuff. This is life, listening. As we kind of wind down, I'm just going to say MIT undergrad, MIT teaching. Just a couple of thoughts about, in my world, MIT is a magical place. So just a couple of emotional responses from you.
Well, MIT is a magical place for me too. For a nerd like me, it was a place where you finally felt at home.
Okay.
And I would say MIT also, it is a wonderful meritocracy. We often talk in our organizations about how and why we want to be meritocracies. MIT does a really good job. And I really respect that about the culture of MIT. So it's been really a fantastic place. Not to say we can't improve in certain areas or aren't things they've done that have annoyed me as an alum. But it was great to go there as a student. I love going back as an instructor. I love being part of the culture. And I'm very lucky to be part of the community.
Great. Great. When we were talking before we went on air, you said something that to me was an oh wow. And of course I'd done my research on you but nowhere did I see that you worked on the dark web.
I did.
And so you tracked, and you gave me permission to say this, so you tracked terrorists and stuff.
Terrorists and cyber criminals on the dark web, yes.
And that's all you want to say about it, or scary thing.
Yeah, so I can't get into too many details.
No, I don't want you to. No.
This comes from my work in cybersecurity. My graduate work at MIT was in the field, and I've been a CTO in different industries, in media, in new language development, and labor marketplaces, but also a number of companies in cybersecurity. And one of these companies, we did basically intelligence gathering. So I likened us to Paul Revere. Now, there's lots of security companies that are like the Army, your firewalls. They're there to stop anyone trying to get in. We were like Paul Revere in that we'd figure out what's happening, what are the attack vectors, and we'd say, hey, the redcoats are coming, and is it by land or by sea? So you could better prepare your defenses. So we would go out onto the dark web and figure out who's doing what, so we could alert our customers who are various companies and government entities. And here's the thing about the dark web, because this is what everyone asks, what is it? Is it a bad place? The dark web, it's called the dark web just because it's a different protocol. It's not HTTP, HTTPS, different protocol. So Google, for example, doesn't index it, and that's why it's dark. The dark web isn't inherently bad. I liken it to a dark alley. Nothing wrong with a dark alley, but if you're going to commit a criminal act, chances are you're going to do it in that dark alley and not in the middle of the well-lit street. So that's why bad guys tend to prefer tools that are more dark. And that's why, for example, they use the dark web for discussions. That's why they use cryptocurrencies and not the banking system for their transactions. So it's not that's wrong, but it is the preferred venue for people doing wrong things.
Okay, that's fine. From a very uneducated, I can't conceive of how people always find ways to overcome and circumvent. And every once in a while, I bump into a student who's going to study cyber security. I said, "What a great! I mean, it's never going to go away, is it? The problems of cyber. There'll always be somebody coming up with a better mousetrap.
Yeah, it's a cat and mouse game, and
it's never going to go away. There isn't a pill. Now, you use the term multivitamin. I got a kick out of that. In talking about this is a multivitamin, and I'm somebody who takes 60 a day. You want to know why I'm youthful? I've been taking 60 supplements a day since 1969. But anyway, I just can't conceive of. I don't process how we can't. Whatever. Anyway, enough said on the dark web. Two last things as we really wind down. I was enthralled with the fact that you were on the MIT Ballroom dancing team.
Yeah, I joined the team. I joined the team after I graduated. I was taking lessons back in, I think, my senior year and then in grad school. Now, the team, by the way, because it's not an NCAA sport,
right?
It was open to alumni, staff, and faculty, as well as students. And in fact, MIT, we were arguably the number one or number two team in the country at the time.
Wow.
There wasn't a direct head-to-head challenge, but we beat the other schools we tended to compete with. Harvard was one of our biggest rivals. We were slightly beating them. I know Brigham Young University had a very strong ballroom team. We didn't compete directly against them as often. We did produce a couple national champions. So we had a really wonderful team, and it was just a great part of my time at MIT. I had lots of friends from there, a lot of fond memories from dancing with the MIT team on the collegiate circuit and going to the national championships for many years.
That's great. That really, I'm so glad I noticed that. There was a movie a while back. I think it starred Richard Gere about ballroom dancing.
He did Dance With Me, which was a remake of the Japanese film Dance With Me. Now, I haven't seen the Richard Gere version.
Okay.
But the original Japanese version was fantastic.
Okay.
It's not just about dancing. I think part of it, the nature of Japanese culture played into why he wanted to do dancing, the implications of what it meant that he did it.
Okay.
They tried to replicate that with Richard Gere as a busy businessman. I haven't seen it, but I doubt it came off quite as well.
Okay. Finally, and just the last, how can people get in touch with you? The book, just tell us.
There's two different websites I'll mention. So the first, the careertoolkitbook.com.
Okay.
And that's where you can see more about the book, where to buy it, Amazon, other places. You can follow me on social media or get in touch with me if you want to bring me into your company or just ask a question. You can also see additional writing I put out each week. I referenced some of those articles earlier. There's the free app, the Career Toolkit app, which I link from the website to the Android and iPhone stores. And then there is the resources page where I have a number of free resources, including the Career Toolkit development program that I mentioned that your company can do to upskill everyone. And all of that is completely free. So that's all at the careertoolkitbook.com. The other website, Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com. Those of you who speak Latin might recognize the meaning. Cognoscomedia.com/brainbump. Or if you go to the website, just click Brain Bump up top, or look for Brain Bump on the Android or iPhone stores. That's also a free app. And that has not only the contents of my book, but right now, the time of this recording, about half a dozen others, and we have a number who are rolling onto the platform each month. So we're going to keep expanding what we offer there.
Fabulous. Mark, this was great. This was great stuff. And we didn't even touch on this, but you're an environmentalist as well as I am another time, which means I sit here in this chair 7 days a week, come back, because we could just talk and talk endlessly. Your journeys, the stuff you learn, what you teach. I mean, it's just great. And I thank the universe for the connection. You've been great.
Thank
Truly.
you for having me on the show.
This has been absolutely wonderful. Do come back. We'll talk about it. And again, everybody, the Career Toolkit, it's life. And it's so critical, whether you think it or not. It's so critical, and it's simple, you know. So thank you so much. You did make my day, and to be continued. Thank you, Mark.